Yes.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. All right, we're live now.
Okay. Good afternoon and good evening, everyone. Let's prepare for group meditation, which we'll do at the beginning, and then we'll follow with the session. So please find a comfortable place to sit. Relax. Close your eyes. Switch off your phones, actually, if you've got them on. Remove any distractions. And now just spend a moment to relax your body from the tips of your toes all the way up to the top of your head by allowing the healing energy from Mother Earth to move up through your system, relaxing every part of your body as it goes. And now let's prepare for meditation. So first of all, just observe your thoughts to see if there's purity in your thoughts. Can whoever's got their sound on, please turn it off because it's making everything echo. Okay. So make sure your posture is ready for meditation, that your back is upright but not rigid, that your limbs are folded inwards, both your arms and your feet. Even if you're sitting in a chair, make sure that your feet are crossed and your hands are gently clasped in your lap, where we keep the energy focused within as we're trying to turn our attention within. Let your breathing settle.
మెడిటేషన్ కదా అటు చేసుకో మెడిటేషన్ జరుగుతుంది అటు పక్క చేసుకో
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes, sister, please go on. Yeah.
Can you please mute everybody else, brother?
So instead of having many thoughts, see if you can come down into your heart and focus on this one thought, which is that the source of light that is already present in your heart is attracting you from within. It's helping you to go deeper and deeper. Be receptive, welcoming, and open to the transmission that's flowing from the Master. If you find your thoughts drifting, it's okay. Treat them like clouds passing in the sky and bring your attention back to your heart again. Very gently, without force. There's no need for any force. And allow yourself to become more and more absorbed within. So once again, we're going to meditate on the source of light that is already present within our hearts, that is attracting us from within. Please start meditation. And that's all. Keep your eyes closed for a while longer and scan your system. Ask yourself, how do I feel? See if there are any changes from before the satsang, before the group meditation till now. And see if you can absorb the condition that you feel, what you've been given during the meditation. Let it be absorbed into your system, integrated into your system. Enliven it. And once you feel that integration has happened, you can gently open your eyes. And hopefully all of you have your diaries, your journals close by. Just spend a couple of minutes making a note of your experience and how you feel now, especially in your journal. Can we move to the next slide, Sarah? Sarah, can we have the next slide, please? Yes, thank you. Just ignore the instruction there about the last 2 weeks. Just journal now your experience during the meditation, and especially how you feel now after the meditation. Okay, shall we move on? I believe we're going to have a whisper reading now. And after that, we'll start with the program.
Olivia?
from brighter world received from beloved Master Vyadaji Maharaj on Monday, April 8, 2002 at 10 a.m. Our wish is this, and compassion, love, and only love, don't doubt it. The aliens rage furiously. India's search by states and religious men utter cries of love towards sky.
Is there a problem with the audio, Brother Karthik? We are receiving
Actually, we couldn't hear her well.
Yeah. Do you
even
want to read
on YouTube also. There's comments being made that they can't hear at all.
yeah. Do you want to read the whisper, brother?
I can't
Yeah.
see.
I'm so sorry. I don't know what happened. I was out
Brother
of
Karthik,
Zoom.
can you read?
I'm so
Brother Karthik,
sorry.
can you read? Sister Livia's audio is poor.
Sure, I can read.
Okay, please.
Monday, April 8, 2002, 10 a.m. Our wish is this. May hearts be filled with more and more love and compassion for others. Love and only love will save the world. Don't doubt it. When the elements rage furiously, helped in their surge by the monstrous mistakes made by mankind, who commit sacrileges towards the earth, Mother Earth, men will only be able to revert to praying and uttering cries of love towards the sky, beseeching the celestial Father. This fury will not stop easily. It will change the current face of the world completely. At that time, the prevailing geographical data will need reviewing. Men who survive this drama will have to adapt to a new form of life, closer to nature than today. They will have to find again the strength to fight and face up to events. Ingenuity will be essential. It will have to offset the current prevailing easiness, which will no longer be there. Values will need reinventing and finding again regarding moral values. There will be a lot to do. The pioneers of those future times will have to be imaginative. Babuji.
Thank you. Thank you, Brother Karthik. I think you can stop sharing the screen. Okay. Thank you. Dear sisters and brothers, a very warm and hearty welcome to all our viewers who are joining us live in our special virtual program, which is being organized for our 90-day challenge program participants. Our participants are on the 22nd day of the challenge, and we welcome them back. We are so glad to meet them, brimming with full of fervor and enthusiasm as a result of practicing like never before. Their enthusiasm is so contagious that it is spreading joy like fire. Special welcome to our honored guest, speaker Dr. Elizabeth Denley, for joining us today from Melbourne, Australia. She will be presenting today a very important topic on managing negative emotions and thoughts for the benefits of all of us, especially during these very challenging times of the pandemic that has affected all of us. It gives me great pleasure to introduce Dr. Elizabeth Denley to all our viewers today. Dr. Elizabeth Denley is a researcher, writer, and editor, and a trainer in values, education, and life skills. She has been practicing meditation since the year 1989. Elizabeth holds a doctorate of philosophy in biological sciences from the University of Sydney, Australia in 1981. She worked in research in science, health, and education from 1977 until 1986 at the University of Sydney, Australia, the University of California, Scripps, and Stanford University, USA, as well as the New South Wales government in Australia and UNHCR in the Philippines. Elizabeth has been involved in values education and training in life skills since 1996 for both children and adults. She has developed value-based education and training programs for schools and colleges in India, Australia, Fiji, and Europe, and have coordinated the development of the Heartfulness education programs for schools. She's a trained facilitator and has been developing, coordinating, and facilitating interactive programs in communication, life skills, and personal development since 1997. Elizabeth has been a certified Heartfulness trainer since 1991 and the editor-in-chief of the internationally published Heartfulness magazine since 2015, and she coordinates content development for Heartfulness. Since 2011, Elizabeth has been involved full-time in Heartfulness activities, including developing ongoing programs for children, youth, and adults, and training facilitators for these programs. In the last year, she has delivered online programs and courses to Amazon USA, Visa USA, MIT World Peace University, and MIT Business School, amongst many others. It is truly indeed a very special privilege and grace to have her with us today in our program. Please join me in welcoming Dr. Elizabeth Denley. Welcome, Elizabeth. How are you doing today? We can't hear you. You're muted.
Very, very fine and happy to be here with you all. I have very fond memories of both visiting Singapore and Malaysia and also my time in Kano with all of you. So with the pandemic the way it is, I haven't seen you for a long time. So it's nice to be here with you, even if it's virtually.
Yeah, it's really lovely to see you today. It's all yours now. It's over to you to carry on with the program for us today.
Okay, so Sarah, I want you to share the slides also so that we can start looking at something other than just me, because it'll be much more interesting this way. So, you know, this is a topic that is very, very dear to Daji's heart. I'm not sure how many of you know Daji or have had any interactions with him or have listened to his talks, but he's very amazing at explaining emotional well-being. And we're going to look at some of that because it's a very vast topic. We're going to start with a quote, and this is a quote from the UN Secretary General back in the 50s and 60s, who said that unless there is a spiritual renaissance, the world will know no peace. So even outside of a spiritual system like ours, like Heartfulness, people recognize that the only way we're going to find peace is through spirituality. And I think once you look at the contents of this presentation, you'll understand why. But first, before we start, can everybody hear okay? Is my voice clear? Is the sound okay before we carry on?
Elizabeth, we can hear you well. There's only one thing that I think you should know. We are not able to enable the rooms.
It's okay. We'll forget about that then. Doesn't matter. Yeah. Okay. Okay. So carry on, Sarah, with the next slide. Okay, so I want you to tell me what you think this emotion is. What is this man expressing? You can write it in the chat if you want to. What emotion are you seeing from this person on the screen? Okay, someone's put frustration. Anyone else? Anger, good. Anger, frustration, anger. Yeah, okay, good. You've got it. Let's have the next one. Desperation, unbearable noise, stress, frustration. Let's have the next one. What about this? What do you think that this woman is feeling? Loneliness? Negative elements? Anyone else? Depressed? Yes, good. Alone? Sadness, in deep thoughts, brooding? Yes, okay. Dejected, good. Next one. What about this boy? What do you see on this boy? Sadness, pain, crying, sadness, abused, pain. Okay. Hunger, sadness, and pain. Right. Okay. Next slide, please. What about this one? Last one. What emotion do you see here? Good. Somebody said fear straight off. Yeah. Okay, so we all recognize we might have mixed ways of presenting this. In fact, all four of those could have been anger, in fact, because people express emotions in different ways. And often we make compound emotions. The underlying emotion might be fear, but on top of that is anger, sadness, etc. It's a complex world, our emotional world, our emotional universe. But we're going to look at how we work with it today, because you all identified these because we all recognize these emotions, because we feel them. When we feel them in ourselves, we also recognize them in others. Okay, next slide. To compound that very basic and normal expression, we have what we call modern life, the VUCA world, volatile, uncertain, chaotic. You know, it's not a world that's conducive to peace and calm. It wasn't before COVID, even more so now. I think there's a lot more uncertainty. But I'm sure many of you recognize this sort of way of living where you have phones, you have tablets, you have people with requests, you have time deadlines, etc. Even if you're not out in the workforce, if you have kids, you would be facing these things day in, day out with their schooling, etc. Next slide. So here are just a few statistics, and these statistics are pre-COVID. These are all from around 2017, when the World Economic Forum and the World Health Organization was measuring aspects of mental health, because they'd already recognized then that it was a pandemic that we were dealing with, a mental health pandemic. So what are the statistics pre-COVID? That roughly 10% of the world's population has some sort of mental disorder. 700 million people. So we have roughly 7 billion people on the planet, 10% of them with a mental disorder. That's a pretty big number. And so this is not just people having an off day. This is people having some sort of diagnosable thing. And half of these were, just over half were people with anxiety disorders. And just under half, the other lot, were people with depression. Of course, there is a much smaller number of people with very severe mental illnesses, things to do with psychosis or schizophrenia or other conditions that require a lot more treatment. But roughly half and half is made up of people with either anxiety or depression. So any of you who sometimes feel anxious or depressed, you're not alone, because with COVID, this is even more prominent now than it was before. The second statistic that's quite alarming, and again, this was pre-COVID, is that the number of suicides per year around the world, which WHO had measured as around 800,000, were greater than people who died from wars, murders, and natural disasters combined. So a lot of people are finding it hard to live, have given up hope, are finding it despairing. And the saddest thing about that is that the second leading cause of death amongst 15 to 29-year-olds around the world is suicide. And what we know too from the statistics is that 3/4 of all adult mental conditions begin before the age of 24, 50% of them before the age of 14. So what's happening is that younger and younger and younger people are feeling mentally imbalanced, feeling like they can't cope so well on a mental level. The other thing that we're finding is that 80% of all visits, first visits to doctors, this is in the US, but I'm sure it's fairly similar in many other parts of the world, certainly the urban developed world, are stress related. And also that work-related stress is now the primary source of stress. So what we're looking at is a pandemic of mental imbalance, of people not feeling good about themselves mentally. Like all the people we saw in the slides earlier, angry, depressed, sad, lonely. I think loneliness with COVID is a huge thing these days. Next slide, please. And if we look at the impact of this on our physical health, the impact of stress and stress-related anxiety and depression, etc., it's huge. It's affecting our cardiovascular system, our immune system, our digestive system, things like headaches, eyesight, bone density, etc. Next slide, please. But we're going to focus more on the impact on mental health, because I think this is where heartfulness and the practices of heartfulness have a huge part to play, which, you know, the world hasn't really recognized yet the role that yoga has in understanding psychology. But even back at the beginning of the 19th century, Sister Nivedita, who was a disciple of Swami Vivekananda, an Irish teacher, Margaret Noble, who went to India and helped him. And she said very clearly that India is the land of psychology. And this is because the yogic tradition is very much the most practical and the most grounded in positive psychology in the world when it comes to understanding mental health. But if we just, let's look at a little bit of data first. So if we look at research from Dr. Richard Davidson, who's one of the foremost neuro researchers in the world, and who's done a lot of research on the effects of meditation. He's a colleague of the Dalai Lama, and he comes from the Vipassana tradition. So what he says is that his research shows that people who are stressed develop brain circuitries like those of people who are depressed. And what they do is they're activating the right part of the front part of the brain, the prefrontal cortex. And what this does is it focuses our attention on negative things all the time. So we start to ruminate around and around and around in a circle on one thought that becomes more and more negative. Say somebody has hurt us or said something really cruel, or say, you know, your best friend or a colleague or whatever has hurt you very badly. If you are in this state where your right prefrontal cortex is active, you'll keep thinking about that. You won't be able to let it go so easily. Whereas happy people and people who meditate develop a different type of brain circuitry, which relates to the left front part of the brain, the left prefrontal cortex, And of course, this has a critical role to play in emotional intelligence, because people who are in that type of neural hardwiring, neural circuitry, can disregard negative information. They know it's there, they hear it, they process it, but they don't get caught up in it. It's not like quicksand where they go into it. They're able to give their attention to other things and let stuff go more easily. There's even more recent research than that shows that meditators also use other parts of the brain, like the insula, which is the interoceptive hub. Now, interoception is where, a person can go inside and feel what's going on inside them. They can feel what's going on in their bodies, in their senses, in their subtle body, their consciousness, which we'll talk about, even up to deeper and deeper levels, different dimensions. So interoception is that ability to look within and witness, observe what's going on. And people who can do this are less judgmental and more feeling-based, because the front part, the prefrontal cortex, is very much to do with judgment and decision making, whereas the insula is much more to do with feeling and witnessing and accepting. So a lot of this research now is showing that, meditation develops these qualities. That's what we're trying to do here. Next slide, please. And I just want to tell you a story, because this just, I think, helps show how meditation can impact the way our emotions affect our work. So this is a story from Cilla Elworthy, who is a pretty famous person in the UK. She founded the Oxford Research Group. She started having dialogues with nuclear weapons makers and decision makers. She set up Peace Direct to support local peace builders. She's been nominated for the Nobel Peace Prize. She won the Nirvana Peace Prize. So many things. And she's very highly respected when it comes to peace and peace negotiation. Next slide, please. She's sent by the UN all over the world so that she can help mediate in tricky situations. And here's what she said. So this is a lady who's right in the thick of armed conflict and tensions. And she says, in half a century of work in this world of armed conflict, the most important lesson I've learned is that inner work is a prerequisite for outer effectiveness. There are two reasons for this. One is that the quality of our awareness directly affects the quality of the results produced. The other reason is that if we haven't investigated our own shadow sides, our jealousy, anger, fear, and greed, and are not continually working to transform them, we are likely to project those unconscious emotions onto others. Next slide, please. So this is a critical point, and it's not something that all meditators are good at, unfortunately. We're going to watch a video now, this video by Alan Watts. So if you can go to the next slide, Sarah, and play it. And then afterwards, we're going to talk about how we connect with these emotions.
So then let's consider, first of all, what is a mind in the grip of vicious circles? Well, one of the most obvious instances that we all know is the phenomenon of worry. The doctor tells you that you have to have an operation. And that has been set up so that automatically everybody worries about it. But since worrying takes away your appetite and your sleep, it's not good for you. But you can't stop worrying, and therefore you get additionally worried that you are worrying. And then furthermore, because that is quite absurd and you're mad at yourself because you do it, you are worried because you worry because you worry. that is a vicious circle. So now, can you allow your mind to be quiet? Isn't it difficult? Because the mind seems to be like a monkey, jumping up and down and jabbering all the time. Once you've learned to think, you can't stop. And an enormous number of people devote their lives to keeping their minds busy and feel extremely uncomfortable with silence. When you're alone, nobody's saying anything, there's nothing to do. There's this worry, this lack of distraction. I'm left alone with myself, and I want to get away from myself. I'm always wanting to get away from myself. That's why I go to the movies, that's why I read mystery stories, that's why I go after girls or anything that you do, or get drunk or whatever. I don't want to be with myself. I feel queer. So, well, why do you want to run away from yourself? What's so bad about it? Why do you want to forget this? Why do you want to become yourself? Because you are addicted to thoughts. This is a drug, a real dangerous one. Compulsive thinking, going on and on and on and on and on all the time. It's a habit. So there's a difficulty about stopping that activity. And you really have to stop it if you want to be sane. Because if I talk all the time, I don't hear what anyone else has to say. Then I'll end up in the situation of having nothing to talk about but my own talking. Or so in exactly the same way, if I think all the time, I won't have anything to think about except thoughts. So in order to have something to think about, there are times when you simply must stop thinking. Well, how do you do that? The first rule is don't try to. Because if you do, you will be like someone trying to make rough water smooth with a flat iron. And all that will do will stir it up. So in the same way as a muddy, turbulent pool quiets itself when left alone, you have to know how to leave your mind alone. It will quiet itself.
Thank you, Sarah. Let's move to the next slide. Okay, so who can relate to that? I'm sure everybody can at some time or another. And of course, it's not just thoughts, it's the emotions that are attached to those thoughts that make them even more potent, make it so they keep coming back and we keep recharging, rethinking, reevaluating, reanalyzing, etc. So what's going on with all this? Why does this happen and what can we do about it? So the one thing that we need to look at, and which is critical to understanding how we work with negative thoughts and emotions, is that this is all about consciousness. All these energies that come up in our system, because after all, thoughts and emotions are only energies, they're vibrations. There's something that arises from within or affects us from without, but they're vibrations. And so this is all happening in the field of our consciousness. On the left-hand side, you can see one of Daji's diagrams, which I'm sure any of you who read Heartfulness magazine or his books would recognize. So what does he say? He says that consciousness is all about our degree of awareness and also our degree of unawareness. So he often quotes this very famous quote of Swami Vivekananda, who says that, you know, consciousness is just a thin film wedged between two great oceans of superconsciousness and subconsciousness. So when we're meditating, when we're going on this spiritual journey that we do in heartfulness, as we practice more and more and more, that thin field of consciousness starts to expand out across this vastness of these two great oceans. We develop awareness into the subconscious and into the superconscious. And this is really, really important, because most of our patterns, most of our negative thinking patterns and negative feeling patterns arise from our subconscious. A lot of the time, we're not even aware that they're happening, or we may be aware, but we don't really fully understand where they've come from. So if I ask you now, how aware are you of your feelings and emotions? Just stop for a minute and just think about that question. You don't have to answer it, and we won't spend much time on it now, but just know it's a very, very important question to ask yourself. Next slide. Why is it important? Because when you look at the science, we find that much more is going on in our subconscious mind than in our conscious mind. So this is work that has been quoted in Dr. Bruce Lipton's book, The Biology of Belief. He summarized quite a bit of the research that had been done that shows that only about 5% of what is going on in our lives is happening in our conscious mind. 95% is going on in our subconscious. And when you look at the number of thoughts that we have, when psychologists and neuroscientists measure thoughts, they talk about it in terms of bits. So they talk about 40 thought bits per second in our conscious mind, which is still quite a lot of thinking going on in an average person, but 40 million bits per second in the subconscious mind. So this is where all our habitual patterns are coming from. And unless we have techniques, unless we have methods that take us into removing all this accumulated layer of what you can say subconscious impressions, we might call them, that are going on in the subconscious mind, these are what dictate our lives, not our conscious thought process. So not only is it the thoughts that Alan Watts was talking about that are going round and round and round, but deeper, as you dive deeper, when you go into the subconscious, you're in a realm where we don't even know what's going on, which is why it's called subconscious. We're not aware of what's going on. And this is what's dictating our reactions to everyday events. Next slide. So we need tools to work with this, basically. So I'd like us now to do a short exercise, just for a couple of minutes. I'd like you to close your eyes. First of all, actually, have your journal and a pen close by. And then when you've done that, close your eyes. And now just observe, just witness. Ask yourself this question: how do I feel right now? Go into your heart and witness how you feel. Not what you're thinking, but how you feel. And when you're done doing that, just go deeper into your heart like we did in meditation and center yourself. Just check in to the source of light in your heart, just to ground and center yourself. And when you've done that, gently open your eyes. And you can write down. What I'd like you to do is write down how you feel, and then try and come up with one word. Just one word that summarizes that. And then we're just going to do a quick Menti poll on that. So if you've got your mobile phone close by or your computer, go to www.menti.com and use the code 96283518 that you see on the screen. And then when it comes up, you write your word in as to how you're feeling. It's all anonymous, so be totally honest. Okay, now we have more coming. Okay, you can see there's such a range according to the situations of people's lives, what they're going through, how they're handling things like COVID, not being able to see relatives, so many things. So we have people on one hand who are calm and content and peaceful, and others who are puzzled, worried, frustrated, annoyed, tired, agitated. It's the full range, and this is what I'd expect because our circumstances are all very, very different. So this is not just about this session, it's about our lives in general. And of course, we're seeing the full range of emotions. It's good. It's good that everybody's able to identify with them. The one thing that I'm not seeing so much there, which I thought I would because it's come up in other parts of the world because of the pandemic and lockdowns, is lonely. But maybe you guys aren't lonely there in Southeast Asia, which is very nice. It's good if that's the case. Okay, somebody's asking for the code again. It's up the top of the screen. No, it's hard to read though. No, it's gone all fuzzy. 9628. Can somebody write it in the chat? Because mine's screen is, no, it's not readable. Okay. I think we're good. I think we can see the range of emotions. So just any last stragglers, 96283518 is the code. It gives an idea of the range of emotions that people face every day. Okay, let's move on. Let's move to the next slide. Now, let's go deeper into this because it's important if we're going to work with emotions and inner states that we can identify them. So there are 8 qualities here, you can say, qualities of your inner world and their expression in the outer world. And we're going to study these a little bit right now. So number 1 is awareness. Number 2 is focus. So awareness is your just general awareness, your observational skills, your awareness of what's going on inside you as well as outside. Focus is your ability to hone in on something, to concentrate more, narrow your attention onto something, whereas awareness can be full 360 degree. Number 3 is your heartfulness practices, the regularity, the intensity, the attitude with which you do them. Number 4 is your emotional well-being. Number 5 is your resilience, your ability to prepare for challenges and also to bounce back when difficult things happen or you have challenges. Number 6 is your consciousness, your overall field of consciousness. How does it feel? Is it turbulent? Is it calm? Is it expanded? Is it contracted? So many different words we can use. Number 7 is your mindful and heartful lifestyle. Like your lifestyle, is it the way you want it to be? Are you making wise choices in your life? Are you regular in your habits of things like your meditation practice, your healthy eating, exercise, so many different things that come, your attitude towards other people, your ability to have healthy relationships, both within your family and in the workplace. All these things are part of a mindful and heartful lifestyle. And number 8, reaching your potential. And that can be, again, in many ways, your potential in a worldly sense as well as a spiritual sense. So we're going to do a few more Menti polls again for you to look at each one of these. So can we move to the next slide, please, Sarah? So again, one word. How would you describe your current state of awareness in one word? Again, go to www.menti.com and use the code 96283518. Same code. It's just the next question that should come up. So how would you describe your awareness right now? Safe, high, improved, sharp, expansive, distracted, momentary, mixed, still, and part of the purpose of this exercise is that you start to look at areas where you want to improve. Not all of you will be good at all 8 things. In fact, if you are, then I doubt that you're being truthful with yourself. So be very honest with this, and let's look at where we all need to improve. So we've also got some people who feel like they need to improve here, which is great. Okay. Not bad, good. Again, we've got a range. So some of you feel like you're doing very well in this area. Some of you feel like you need to work more. And that's good. If you feel that you need to work more, that's fantastic. It means that you're looking at improving. And as we do this, you might want to take notes while other people are doing it so that you can figure out how you want to improve. What do you want to do? Next one. Let's go to the next one, Sarah. Okay, same thing. What is one word that describes the quality of your focus? Your ability to really focus on a task, your goals in life, your purpose, etc. Or do you get easily distracted into other things and feel frustrated that you're not able to achieve the things you want to? And look at it in terms of your calendar time. Do you give calendar time to the things that matter to you most? Because if you don't, it means that your focus is not where it needs to be. Okay. Okay, so here we're seeing good need for improvement from a number of people. And this is great. This is what I would expect because this is the hardest thing for most people. You may want certain things in your life. You may want to achieve certain things. It could be something as simple as getting up early to meditate before dawn, or it could be something very, very big in your life. But, you know, often we struggle with the discipline to focus on certain things, on our goals and on our purposes. So those of you who've written things like not always, good, needs to improve, distracted, needs some work, etc. Take some time after this session to figure out how you want to do that better. So can we move to the next one, I think, because otherwise we're going to run out of time. Let's move forward now. What is one word that describes your heartfulness practice? So think about all the aspects of it. Its intensity, its regularity, its depth, whether I have awareness when I'm practicing, all those things. And just come up with the one word that best describes your practice currently. It may be different next week, so there's no judgment in this. Okay, good. Again, mixed. For those of you who've put things like improving, needs improvement, irregular, things like that, need to go deeper, I suggest that during this 90-day challenge, you really work with your trainer. Work with a trainer to identify how you can improve, how you can develop your intensity, how you can take it to the next level. Really, really do that, because it's a difficult thing for many people, and not everybody has such wonderful experiences in meditation that they feel joyful about it. especially in the early stages when so much work is going on internally to get us to first base. And even after that, I've had a lot of comments from people who've said that, you know, in the lockdown, they've lost the momentum or they've lost their enthusiasm to be really regular with the practice and feel the deeper states. Work together. Don't try and do it on your own, because we need help. All of us need help to kickstart the next level when we're feeling that way. So it's good that you've highlighted these things. Now figure out how you're going to resolve those challenges and move forward. Next one, Sarah. Okay, now we come to the crux of the matter. What is one word that describes your emotional intelligence? So by emotional intelligence, I mean your ability to manage your emotions, your self-awareness of your emotions, your ability to relate to the emotions of others, and the ability to be resilient, to bounce back when you feel like things are tough. So, you know, it's the world of your emotions and how you manage them. Do you have mastery, or are you still struggling? Are you still at the mercy of your emotions, you could say? What happens when you get angry? What happens when you get sad? How does it affect you? Think about all those things and describe it in the best way you can. Okay, again, we have a big, big range. From somebody who feels that they manage it in an excellent way, to somebody who's fed up, to somebody who's feeling very low, somebody who's unaware most of the time, struggling. So others are improving. Okay, so as you can see, full range. Again, this is for you. If you feel that you need to improve in this area, look at, you know, we'll talk about the tools next. Look at what it is that can help you with this, and talk to your trainer about this if you feel safe enough and open enough to be able to share that with them and get some inputs. Because none of us are here to judge each other. We're only here to support each other. That's a very important thing to understand about Heartfulness. That Heartfulness is a community where we are here for each other. And there's nothing to hide. There's nothing to be shy about. Okay, let's move on to the next one. Right, so resilience, as I mentioned, is that special ability to be able to bounce back and handle challenges in a very positive and constructive way. So, what is one word that describes your ability to be resilient? Okay, so this one's a lot more positive. Some people are saying that they still need improvement, but overall, it seems like this is a quality where people are already doing reasonably well. Remember, we're talking about how you handle things, not what the word means. So how do you handle it, for example, if, say, a family member has passed away from COVID, or you're struggling with your teenage kids or whatever? How do you bounce back from challenges? Okay, good. So again, if you feel that you need improvement there, make a note of it. Let's move on to the next one. All right, now this one is, this basically here, all these words, all these descriptions, we're reading our condition, right? And this one is super important in regard to that. What is one word that describes your consciousness right now? Okay, I'm happy to see so far that this is an area where people are talking about movement and improvement. People are not saying they're there already. They're saying we're moving, we're transitioning, we're expanding, we're growing, which is great, because that's exactly what you want to be. But if it's difficult, like somebody has said, or a little low, again, get some help. Talk to a trainer. Take some more sittings. If you have to, take a sitting every day for the moment, whatever you need to move you to the next stage, so that you're feeling more resilient, more able to cope. But it's good. It's good to see the responses. Okay, Sarah, let's move to the next one. All right, so now one word that describes your lifestyle. How mindful and heartful is your lifestyle? Describe it in one word. I like it that somebody's written that they're a minimalist person, because that's a great description of lifestyle. Okay, so again, if you've made a note of something where you feel like you need to improve here, for example, how disciplined are you? How You know, how much time do you spend on your phone or in front of the TV, or all sorts of things affect this, your mindful and heartful living. How aware of you are of the needs of the other people around you? Do you give special time to your loved ones every week? All those sorts of things. It all makes up mindful and heartful living. So again, look at yourself, evaluate yourself, find out where you can improve so that you're starting to develop more positivity in your psychology. Let's move to the next one. Okay, one word that describes how you feel, that where you're at in terms of reaching your potential. Nobody's yet reached it, so you're in good company. If anybody tells me they've reached it, I'll know that they're not telling the truth. Miles to go. I love it. Improving. Okay. Okay. So part of doing this exercise was to get you to look inside and observe. And also to see how authentic you could be in coming up with words that really describe what's going on inside you. In other words, how aware are we all of what's going on inside ourselves? Because without that, you know, we can think that we're perfect in some way. Of course, nobody's ever perfect, but we can think we are, but we may have miles to go. So things like that is very, very important if you're wanting to develop emotional well-being, to be able to do these things and be truly authentic. And that takes a lot of work, takes a lot of practice. Okay, let's move on to the next slide. Okay, so we were going to have you go into breakout groups, but it's okay. We won't do that today because the technology is not working. So you can write down this question and take it away with you to introspect on and just spend some time on during the next week. So 2 questions actually. How to manage your life in such a way that you reduce your negativity and reactiveness in situations. How to remain positive. So the answers are all there in this presentation, but I want you to find the ones that are going to work for you, because the practices we have deal with all this, and that's where we're going to focus now for the last half hour. But each one of us has things that we do better than others. For example, some people are better at meditating than others. Some people are better at cleaning than others. Some people are better at prayer or doing maxim 10 or trying to maintain the meditative state during the day. Everybody's different. Everybody has a different strength and weakness. And, you know, the whole thing is to find out of this what works for you. What is going to strengthen your journey forward, your purpose in life. So let's move on. Has everybody had time to look at those and make a note of them? Yeah. Okay, so let's move forward. We're going to do a little bit of theory now. And with this, do you want to have a 2-minute break beforehand? Because we're changing tact a little bit. We're moving now towards the solutions. Do you want to have a 2-minute stretch and bathroom break before we continue, or what do you think, Ramesh?
Sure, if we could do that, 2 minutes.
Just 2 minutes. So, you know, do what you need to, stretch your arms in the air or stand up, go get a glass of water or whatever, but be back by, you know, in 2 minutes time. So
6:35, 6:37.
yeah, you're 6:37. Perfect.
Thank you.
Okay. So let's carry on now. So now the question is that we know all these things exist. We know that we all have emotions. We all know we deal with emotions like anger and love, fear, desires, discomfort, restlessness, because they're part of the human condition. So what do we do about that? How do we learn to master them? And if we start with what yoga really is, and this is just the first 2 slokas from Patanjali's Yoga Sutras. If we look at what yoga really is and what we're trying to do here in Heartfulness, we understand why Sister Nivedita said that yoga and India is the place of psychology. Because how does Patanjali start? He says, now after prior preparation comes the discipline of yoga. And what does he mean by that? He means that after we've lived life, after we've experienced lots of things, we decide that we want something to improve our lives. We want to manage our emotions better, or we want to feel more inner peace, or we want to transform ourselves in some way. We may want God realization, but most people are not there at the beginning. Most people come to a practice like Heartfulness to feel better about themselves, to let go of negative patterns, to find more joy, more balance, more happiness, and to generally have more of a sense of purpose in life. So then, because of that, because they've realized they need that, all of us realize we need that, we come to the discipline of yoga. So that may mean we start with meditation, we may start with something else like asanas and pranayam. But generally, if we're on the path of yoga, we will come into this discipline. And then when we get here, what are we doing? What does Patanjali say? He says, yoga is the stopping of all the movements, the vibrations, the modifications of the mind in the field of consciousness. So he's saying that we're moving from turbulent, outward-faced, thought-based, emotion-based consciousness to stillness. And in heartfulness, what is this? We're talking about going from the outside of our being, where we look outwards to the world and we're pulled and pushed by desires and ego reactions and things, to the center of our being, where there's stillness and where we're connected with the source, this source of light that's at the center of our being, where we find stillness, where we find joy, we find the qualities of the soul. So we're moving from this outside peripheral state of existence into our center. It's not that we stop living in the world. We still go about our daily activities. We still, do things with our families, at work, with our friends, etc. But there's a centeredness because we are connected with the center of our being, the stillness of our being. So let's move on, Sarah. Next one. And if you look at what Patanjali says, and this is a diagram of Daji again, coming from his yogic psychology articles from the Heartfulness magazine in 2018, I believe, 19, and December, and you'll find it online, or you may have a physical copy. So we have this stillness at our center, right? And this stillness is the essence of who we are and where we're connected with everyone else through the heart. But then what happens is when we go out into the day, when we're living our lives, when we're active, our mind gets busy. And so it should, because the mind's not meant to be still all the time. When we're meditating, we go into stillness, but then when we have to go to work, or we have to be with our kids, or we have to teach, or we have to do anything, we're using the mind. And the mind is moving according to these vrittis. And unfortunately, I don't know if anybody else's screen is very fuzzy, but mine is incredibly fuzzy. It's very hard to read them. But these vrittis are just the way we use our thinking and feeling processes in everyday life. So there's one set of vrittis which are about right thinking, right knowledge, correct thinking, and right understanding. The second one is about incorrect thinking, you can say. The third one is about imagination. Fourth one is about sleep. And the fifth one is about memory, our processes of memory. So vrittis are not something inherently negative in themselves, but they're taking the mind away from the center into activity during the day. Now, what happens is that we can either just let that happen, let it flow through us, remove or have no impressions from all that. Or if we do have impressions, if some of it catches inside us, we can clean it off in the evening during our evening cleaning and go back to, again, having a clear field of consciousness. But if we don't do that, if we react to something and it's still there the next day, our thoughts are still there, or our feelings are still there, then what happens is that vritti, that vibration in our field of consciousness, has developed a coloring. And that coloring is something where we either like it or dislike it. And we develop a judgment that it's good or bad, or that I'm happy about this. We get happy for something. It could be because our kids have done really well at school or something like that. We feel happy and proud of them. And if they haven't, we feel sad and embarrassed and not happy. So, we color things based on our past, and also in the moment how we react to things. So that's one level of coverings, of complexities that starts to develop. First, there are the vrittis, which are just the movements of the mind in day-to-day life. And then if we have impressions from those, if we react to them, if we like or dislike, then they develop a coloring, a klesha. And then that creates a tension, a knot of energy in our system, which then forms into a samskara. And we're not letting it go. We're holding on to something. But then it gets more complicated because we have movement and then we have colorings. But then if those things become obstacles, if they start to develop into habits and patterns, they become what are called the vikshepas in yoga. So we have another layer of complexity. We're moving out from the stillness of the center to various colorings, to complexities. And these are all complexities of the ego, of, laziness, of so many different things. And you can't read them there, unfortunately. I'll share this PowerPoint with everybody. Otherwise, you look for them in Yogic Psychology and Heartfulness magazine. But what happens is by the stage of the vikshepas, we've got into knots or entanglements where we're no longer functioning in a clear field. The pulls and pushes of our desires and our ego reactions are now very, very real. And I'll give you an example. If, you've been scared by something as a small child, for example, maybe you've been scared because you've been bitten by a dog, or you've had lizards fall from the roof onto you as a small child, so you're scared of lizards. Many things that happen to us. So this happens and it creates patterns and it repeats, because when we have fear, we attract exactly the same things again and again and again, and it gets reinforced and it becomes a habit, it becomes a pattern. And when this happens, our perception is affected. We don't see things clearly anymore. As soon as a dog comes into the street, we start to feel scared. We react badly. So there are many ways that these, the vrittis to the colorings to these complexities, obstacles and distractions start to develop. And this means that when we're in this stage, we're reacting emotionally all the time. And we don't see things clearly anymore. And we're unable to really feel that connectedness within us. So for this purpose, cleaning every day, cleaning all these things off is super, super important. And then, of course, if we allow these to develop and continue, then it leads to what are called the vinyas, which are the outer expressions of these. Pain, whether it's mental or physical, despair, depression, trembling of the body, anxiety, and also it affects our breathing. We end up with irregular breathing patterns like asthma or many, many things that can affect us because of all this. All this stems from not having a pure consciousness and not connecting with our center. So what yoga says and what we do in heartfulness is that, when we meditate, what are we doing? We're connecting with our center. When we're cleaning, we're removing all these complexities and impurities that lead to the kleshas, to the vikshepas, to the vinyas. We're removing them day by day by day, so that eventually all these knots of complexities of emotions just unravel. Without this, if you try and feel calm and happy, but you're angry inside, it won't happen, because the root cause of that anger is still sitting inside you. So until we actually do the practices to remove these, we're stuck with them. And we may feel good a lot of the time, but then something bad happens and we fall into that pattern again. So it's really important to understand this, because when you do, you'll understand that yoga gives us the tools, and especially heartfulness, because the heartfulness meditation practices are designed specifically to purify the field of consciousness, to remove all these mental modifications. So, and they do, and you don't have to do anything else other than just do the practices. Okay, so let's move on, Sarah. I don't think we have time to go into this, unfortunately, but this just explains a little bit. If you remember, we spoke before about consciousness, super consciousness, and subconsciousness. Meditation helps us a lot to move into, to expand from that mundane level of awareness into our superconscious states. It really helps us. We feel this, we experience this in meditation, especially when we have meditation sessions with a trainer, with Daji. We can, even on our own, we can go into states that open us up to awareness and inspiration that we wouldn't find otherwise in just mundane living. Whereas prayer and cleaning help us to connect deeper within and uncover and let go of our subconscious patterns, especially the prayer that we do that's called Maxim 10, which is before we do our bedtime prayer at night. With Maxim 10, we are acknowledging, we're repenting for anything that we've done, either knowingly or unknowingly, any wrongdoing. So that's wrongdoings to ourselves, wrongdoings to others, wrongdoings to nature. You know, it's about our relationships in general. If there's anything we've done in Maxim 10, we let this go. We repent for it. We feel sorry for it. And most importantly, we vow not to do it again. We're starting to shift our subconscious patterns. So if our tendency during lockdown is to get angry with our kids and yell at them because they're driving us nuts, and you want to break that pattern, you need to find a way to do this by at bedtime, acknowledging the pattern, letting go of it, repenting for it, and keeping on practicing, saying, let this go. I'm not going to do this again. So that eventually it will happen. Prayer is an incredibly effective way to work with the subconscious, as is cleaning, of course, because cleaning is removing the root impressions, the root causes. And of course, all this and our experience, which is stored in our subconscious, gives us our intuition and our life experience. So this is how we expand our field of consciousness. We don't just sit with our eyes closed and say, our master's doing the work. He's expanding our consciousness. This is wonderful. We have to do something about it. We have to work with it. And these tools can really guide us. So let's move on to the next slide. So Sarah, you've asked if knowingly done a mistake could still be appealed. It's much harder, because if we've knowingly done something, we've done it consciously. And that's a much harder thing to remove. We need to really look at changing ourselves and looking at those patterns. Of course it can be, but it takes a lot more to do that, and to remove the guilt that we feel for knowingly doing something that we know is not right. And we know that all this happens, especially the region where we master our emotions and desires is what we call the heart region. The 5 chakras of the heart region, the 5 outer rings of Babaji's 23 rings, for those of you who know about them. If you don't know about them, don't worry about it for now. So our journey in heartfulness, and just before I start on this, Ramesh, I'm very conscious of time. We're getting close to 9 o'clock. So do you want me to continue for another 10 minutes or so, or should we stop?
We are fine. I think you have quite a bit to go. Oh.
We'll cut it because it'll get too long otherwise. But it's okay. We can have another 5 minutes maybe on this, and then Q&A at the end, yeah?
Yeah, sure.
Okay.
Please go ahead.
Yeah, so maybe we'll talk about this more in the other session that I do on evolution of consciousness. But this is the area, the heart region, which is where we start in heartfulness. This is where we start our journey. And this is where we're working with the emotions. So what happens is that as we move from chakra to chakra, we learn to master a different set of emotions each time. It's a new journey and we're learning more as we go. So move on to the next slide, please, Sarah. So what we can say, so imagine now that, you know, we've these 5 circles are related to those 5 chakras you saw in the earlier diagram. Oops, they're the wrong way around. This is an old slide. I'm so sorry. Okay. My fault. Contented should be down at the bottom right where compassionate is. So at the first chakra on the lower left side of the chest, which if you're facing it here is on the right side here, is contented. What happens as we move through this chakra, we start to develop the ability to let go of our desires and feel more contented. As this chakra is purified, contentment starts to come. Then as we move, and of course with that, with contentment comes a sort of a self-confidence in our ability not to be pulled and swayed all the time by our desires, by our feelings of inadequacy, our worries, also by sensual pleasures, and by things like guilt and shame, likes and dislikes, etc. So contentment comes because we learn how to master these strong pulls by working at point 1, the first chakra. Then as we move across to chakra 2, we're dealing with the calmness that comes from feeling the presence of the soul very strongly, of being in that realm where the soul is uppermost, and generally all we want to do is meditate and go inside. So it's a difficult time often for our families because we're not interested in worldly things in the same way. But then eventually as we move into that and we master that, we get the balance between the two of calmness and contentment, of worldly life and of spiritual life. And we come to some state of integration and balance where we're no longer pulled one way or the other. And then as we move up to the third point, which is where compassion is, where you see clear here. In the third point, the fire point, we start to develop through love and our mastery of anger, the ability to be compassionate towards others, to love other people at a deeper level, to learn how to manage our anger. So we're dealing with the fiery emotions, the emotions of transformation. And then, of course, we move to point 4, where we learn to master, we learn to work with the emotions of fear and courage, overcoming fear, being courageous but not arrogant in the way we're courageous, having that inner strength where love deepens. And then eventually, as we move up through the heart region, clarity comes. As these 4 lower chakras develop, we develop clarity. We're no longer confused in our decision-making abilities. We can start to see clearly, understand ourselves, witness, be able to do what we've been talking about, the ability to look within and master our emotions. So this is what comes through practice, but we also have to be aware and work with it. Next slide. I think we'll skip this because it's going to go on too long. So let's move on. We'll skip this too. Okay, so let's just do one last mentee poll because I think there's a lot to take in this. So I want you to write again in one word, how are you feeling now? You may be feeling a bit confused by all this, and that's my fault. I'm really sorry we went over time. But other than that, just see if you can go inside using the techniques that we've spoken about and just come up with one word for your state of feeling. Okay, so I haven't completely confused you. That's good. You know, while you're doing that, in yoga, there's one of the niyamas, which is called swadhyaya. And swadhyaya means self-study. And, you know, that's really what we've been trying to do in this session. Because to manage your negative thoughts and feelings, you need to not be scared of them, not want to run away from them, and to look inside. And when they come up, which they will sometimes, there'll be times when you feel despondent or angry or lonely or whatever, how to work with that. Not to push it aside and say, oh, just let me watch a good movie so I feel better, but to actually work with it and say, all right, what do I need to let go of here? And how can I start to feel more grounded and centered within myself? So it's a work in progress. It's being self-aware. And Patanjali actually says that to reach the ultimate, to unify, become one with God, we have to develop this ability of swadhyaya, self-study, which is basically this awareness and consciousness that we spoke of before, expanding our consciousness out through the fields, the oceans of the superconscious and the subconscious, and especially cleaning out our subconscious so that we can be more balanced in our reactions. And so that when something like anger comes up, we can use it wisely. We can use it for our benefit instead of taking it out on our spouse or our kids or somebody else in our life who doesn't deserve it. So that's really the thing, is to work with this and to feel good about working with it, and to share with others when you need support, to ask your trainer, and to move forward and improve yourself the best way you can. Next slide. Okay, so we've come to the end of what I have to say. Now it's your turn, all of you.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Dr. Elizabeth Denley, for that first session, which was very enlivening, and with all those practical exercises to identify our strengths and weakness and to become authentic of ourselves, and also for those interesting facets on science and psychology of yoga, which we will look forward in your next session on probably in November, which you'll be actually coming back again to do evolution of consciousness. So we look forward to that. Now it's supposed to be our planned or scheduled bio break, but since we had a bio break already, shall we take another 2 minutes before we come back for an exclusive interview with Dr. Elizabeth Denley?
I'm okay either way. We can take 2 minutes now if you want.
Take 2 minutes. Thank you. Welcome back.
Go ahead, brother. Sorry.
Welcome back. In our next segment, we will take some questions for Elizabeth to enlighten us and inspire all of us from our vast experiences. Is she ready? Is she around?
I'm around.
Okay, thank you. Okay, so we are ready. Okay, the first question we have is this related to the practice of heartfulness meditation that we all undergo at some stage? How do I handle the negative feelings and emotions, especially the ones that comes during meditation or cleaning?
Okay. So one thing that our masters have always said is that when something comes up in meditation or cleaning, it's coming up to go. It's surfacing to leave. And, that's very, very common in the cleaning process. And it's one of the reasons why people, all of us at times struggle with cleaning when something uncomfortable is coming up. And the more uncomfortable it is, the more we struggle because we don't want to face it often. And so it takes, this is where the courage is needed, because to really master your emotions, you have to face them. You have to allow, when something uncomfortable comes, you have to not indulge in it, not analyze it, but acknowledge and let it go. And so if you read Babaji's diaries, if you read Charaji's diaries, you'll find these things. Lalaji's, his diaries, his letters, all our masters talk about this, and they don't shy away from it. So when you find yourself resisting in any way, even if you're not aware of negative thoughts and emotions, they're probably there. Otherwise, you wouldn't be resisting. What do we do with them? We let them go. We don't judge them. There comes a point when it's easy to let go of positive and negative likes and dislikes because we've moved past that. But in the meantime, when you're experiencing it, it's okay. Everyone has them. And, when when Babaji writes about his anger, he does so as if he's a scientist writing about, watching leaves on a tree or something. He's just writing about it. So it's about developing this attitude of self-awareness without judgment, self-compassion, so that when you see things inside you that you don't like, it's okay, just let them be. Note them. Note what you need to learn from them, but don't judge. And that's why Maxim 10 is also so important, because when you're letting go of things at night before you sleep, knowingly or unknowingly having done things, you're cleaning the slate of all this. You're not reinforcing guilt, which of course is the hardest thing to remove, the hardest emotion to remove. And so you're allowing yourself to move forward in a lighter and lighter, more carefree way. And it gets easier as you go on. But as Babaji says, it's just what's happening in your consciousness. Don't get too caught up in it. Practice that. Practice letting it go.
Thank you. That's very comforting. So it's not something that we see that it's going to happen in our lives, or it's something it's foreseeing.
No, it's just, the mind play, the mind's doing its thing. It's trying to get rid of all the stuff that's in there. It's trying to show us what needs to change. Nature's working with us all the time. And, with the help of the master, we have an even better ability to remove all this stuff. But you will see it when it's coming out, or you'll feel it sometimes. You'll feel discomfort. You'll feel restlessness. It's okay. Just know that it's like the weather, and we all go through it, and they go through it. So, of course, we go through it.
Good. The next two or three questions is about what everyone is facing in the pandemic situation. So, how should we deal with cabin fever in this time during the pandemic, especially in an environment where you are the only one who practices meditation?
Yeah, a lot of people are facing this at the moment, aren't they? All right. So why do we feel cabin fever in the first place? Often we may have been stuck at home for months on end, maybe with family, extended family. I'm sure many of you live in apartments as well. Not everybody has a big garden. It's not so easy because we're social creatures. We do better when we can be outside, when we can have sunshine on us much more. So many different things we're facing, even physiologically, that are different when we're in lockdown. And of course, cabin fever is there. I mean, it's not going to change in the sense that, the world isn't quickly changing back to what we call pre-COVID normal. But what do we do to help ourselves? So, for example, if cabin fever is because of a lack of exercise, put on a video and dance, or put on a video and, walk, or do stretching, do yoga. I mean, Heartfulness Yoga has videos every day that people can join yoga classes. There's no shortage of things to do. It may not be the same as going out to the park or the beach or whatever, but it's something. Similarly with your mental well-being, if part of your mental well-being is to go out and see your friends and have lunch or have coffee or whatever you do to chat with people, find the best ways you can to do that. Get on a Zoom. My son was telling me that last night he and his friends, they're all in separate places in lockdown, but they all watched a movie together. And, and then they chat about it afterwards. What did they think of the movie, etc. Just do whatever you can. But then, of course, the meditative practices help a lot. Because when you're feeling frustrated, when you're feeling that sometimes a bit despairing or a bit lonely, or you're missing family members that you haven't seen in a long time because you can't travel, all these things are there. They're there for all of us. But you do your best. You meditate more than ever. I think the best thing about lockdown is that we all have the possibility to do our meditative practices even better than before, because we're not having to rush out the door, first thing in the morning or whatever. We have time. It just means a lot more self-discipline because everything's going on at home. So this need for setting regularity, what Daji calls automatism in the practice. And if you need to use this 90-day challenge to do just that, you will have done something wonderful for yourself. If that is the outcome of this 90-day challenge, that at the end of it, you've developed the habit of meditating in the morning, cleaning in the evening, doing your bedtime prayer at night, relaxing when you need to, etc., then you will have achieved something magnificent, because habits take time. And so then you can really use this cabin fever, this being in lockdown, to your benefit. If you put your mind to it, and again, don't get distracted by all the negative thoughts and emotions that are going on in different areas, like cabin fever. That's exactly what it is. And it's not easy. Nobody said it was easy, but it's a great challenge to take up.
Yeah, it's interesting that there's still so much that can be achieved during these times, but there are still some, on the contrary, there are perspectives that suggest that the pandemic has brought a global positive lifestyle change to humanity. What are your views on this?
Well, I think, yes, of course, it's brought positives and negatives. I mean, there are a lot of negatives. There's been a lot of tragedy. A lot of people have passed away. A lot of people have lost family members. A lot of people have lost their income, so it's not all wonderful, for sure. But you all, I'm sure, have seen in the news about, from places in the Punjab where people could see the Himalayas for the first time in 30 years because pollution went down. Delhi, people could see each other in the street because there was no pollution for the first time in so long. Our effect on the environment was definitely lessened because we were all cooped up inside. Not only that, because of different practices. I was just saying to somebody today, I haven't had a cold since March last year because we're all so careful now about hygiene and washing our hands and not coughing on each other and stuff like that. Last year I'm sure I would have had 2 or 3 colds, but nothing because of difference in lifestyle. I think appreciating what we had before, what we took for granted, and being grateful for certain things is much greater now than it used to be. There are so many ways it's positive. It's forced everybody in the world to rethink how we live our lives. So yes, it's not all positive, but certainly we can take what we can from this situation and learn from it and make it an opportunity to do better in future as a species.
What are some of the measures we can take to support our family members during this time?
Dr. Adizes wrote a really lovely article in Heartfulness magazine that was called Calendar, a Mirror to Our Values. And he said, as a busy person that he is, he's the CEO of a big company. He consults to people all around the world. He's traveled a lot. And he said that, he had to force himself to realize that if he values something, he needs to give it time in his week or in his day or in his month. And that includes things like having dinner with his wife, a nice one-on-one dinner with his wife, or individual times that he allocates to spend time with his kids. Things like that go into his calendar now because they're important to him. So I think one of the ways, if we are really heartfulness practitioners, what are we radiating out to our families, to our communities, to our friends? If we really are heartfulness practitioners, what we will radiate out is peace and love and harmony and the ability to be there to support others. Because that's what our practice brings us. If we're getting the benefit of it, what can we be giving to others to help them? And so in theory, if we're doing our practices intensely and we're really getting the most out of this, we will have a lot more to give to our family members. And we can support them as they're struggling, if they're struggling. I mean, imagine being a teenage kid at the moment and being in lockdown. It's not easy, right? You're stuck at home. At that stage in your life, you just want to be out. You want to be with your friends, but you also want to be out and about, discovering the world, doing things. And here we have a situation where they're stuck at home for months and months on end. How can we support them? Think about it every day. What can I do for each one of my family members today? What time will I spend with them this week where I can listen to their concerns, where I can let them know that I'm here for them, or I can give them my support in some way? Then as heartfulness practitioners, we're really doing something useful. Because our practice is not just for us. That's first stage. We get to first base. But if it's not going out into our environment, then there's no point. So this is the springboard then to bring something to everybody in our lives we can touch in a really positive, good way.
That's really very helpful for all of us to see how we can bounce back. Moving on, this is here is where a very important answer that we can't wait to hear from you, which is related to your association with Revered Daji. You are one of the very few or rare few people who have known Revered Daji very closely, that too for a very, very long time. Many of us would like to know, in your experience with Revered Daji, how he has changed from who he was from the time you knew him when he was regional in charge of Oceania to becoming nominated as the successor to Chariji, and finally now the master as we know him. Would you mind sharing your first-hand experiences, witnessing his entire process of transformation? We would really like to hear some stories from behind the scenes of the master in the making until today.
Wow, what a question. Where to start? Well, one thing I'm sure you would know from listening to him speak his stories is that, you know, his spiritual journey started a long time ago. It's not just since he became the master or whatever. You know, even as a small child, he was, you know, he used to pull at his father's dhoti to take him to the temple. You know, he studied as a kid, you know, even before he was a teenager, he was reading the complete works of Swami Vivekananda. He studied the Quran, you know, he was so interested in spirituality. And, you know, this has to have come from lifetimes. And that's clear to me that, you know, this is a being, this is a soul who is, you know, has been prepared over many, many lifetimes. But having said that, of course, all our personalities develop as we progress. And one of the amazing times for me, which I just, you know, I feel so blessed to have had the opportunity, was, you know, after, well, for a start, he was our, as you said, our regional coordinator for Oceania. So I was lucky enough to have a lot more time with him even before he was nominated as the successor. And then when I moved to Manapakam in 2011, and I was there with both Chariji and Daji, working in publications and working on the books, etc. So it was a very special time. And of course, he was nominated as the successor not long after, just a few months after that. And then I was there through that whole period from, you know, when he was nominated to when Chariji eventually attained Mahasamadhi, and Daji took over as the master. And all I can say is that watching one master preparing another and seeing the immense love and capacity and potential and givingness and all these qualities that we talk about in both masters, and see this unfold, is something which, I don't know, I mean, it's a gift of a more than one lifetime. It just was amazing to be around during that time. And then amazing to see also the development in Kanna after that. After Chariji's passing, Daji went to the US for a while and came back and you know, started getting Kanna developed, went back to the US and then came back and has really put his heart into the development of the Kanna Shantivanam project, which is where I live most of the time, although I'm here in Australia now because of the pandemic. And being in that environment, seeing how he has built this vision of the masters, of, because Babaji talks about Kanna in the Whispers. You know, Chariji spoke about Kanna. Chariji went there and he told one of our sisters in Australia way back in 2003, that this would be the place of the future, even before they'd found the land. So this thing has been in preparation. You know, no one master works alone. It's a continuum of the hierarchy and the masters from the brighter world and the living master here, bringing about this transformation in humanity. And, you know, it's so inspiring. It's so incredible. For example, little things. You know, when people come and visit Daji in Kana, the way he greets a family. And, you know, many of them he's known, like he's known me for years. He's known so many people for years because he's been so involved in the mission for so long also, from his student days in Ahmedabad and then in the US and, you know, all over the place. And so many people know him, and he knows their kids and he knows their parents and he knows their grandparents and their aunties and whatever. And they come, and it's like always like this most incredible, joyous meeting, and seeing the graciousness, the etiquette of Daji as a master is just mind-blowing. I'm sure some of you may have seen this book by Lalaji, The Complete Works of Lalaji, Volume 4, where the whole book is about etiquette and character, and Lalaji's instructions about what to do in certain circumstances, how to be with the master, how to eat food, how to meditate, all these things. It's just a practical exposition. And when you watch Daji in action, it's purely that. It's pure etiquette, pure what we call in the Urdu tradition of Sajmag, akhlaq. Lalaji used to call it akhlaq. So this thing of character, of how to behave, it's inbuilt in him. It's not something he has to practice or is forced or whatever. It's there. And so you see it in his interactions with people, the humility to let someone else shine, the humility to work from behind and let another person take something forward, not to harp on people's mistakes, but to let them learn from their own mistakes, to let Abhyasis discover things for themselves rather than him telling all the time. He much prefers, and he used to tell us this way back, long before, you know, he was the master, way back even in Oceania. He'd say, don't, you know, as preceptors, don't lecture people. As, you know, as Abhyasis, don't go around in the general public lecturing everybody. Let them discover for themselves. You know, it's like a kid playing hide and seek. If you go and tell the kid, oh, your friend's over there in the cupboard, you ruin the game. He said, you know, when we try and tell everything, it doesn't work because people need to experience. So I just love the way he encourages people to experience, young people especially. He's given a lot of focus to the youth, and some of my favorite memories are in Satkol at the youth seminar in October in 2017, where he would just enable them, just encourage them with so much of love, with so much of humor. You know, every night we'd sit out on the terrace, and it was freezing, but we'd sit out on the terrace with all our coats and rugs and hats and scarves on, listening to music with these young people asking him questions. And he would very patiently respond and joke with them and ask them questions back so that they could discover for themselves. So, you know, traveling around, traveling in Europe, traveling in North America, traveling in India, seeing him engage with every community in the same way, just with love and with this openness to let everybody blossom and shine. I mean, it's really, it's just watching the master in action. It's just superb. You learn so much.
You're indeed very blessed, sister, and fortunate to be working with Private Daji for so long and on a daily basis. You have already shared some of his character traits, but is there any specific working styles, working ethics, and of course some unforgettable lighter moments that you would like to share while working with him closely?
I
Not
think,
serious ones, but lighter moments.
yeah, I think, his humor he's hilarious at times. Nothing is coming to mind at the moment, but he often has us laughing. And he loves humor because, as he says, it just creates this lightness. I think working style, what amazes me is his ability his trust in people. Chariji once said, when somebody asked, how can you trust us when we make so many mistakes all the time? And he said, I trust the potential in you. What I see in Daji is that magnified to the most incredible extent. And, you see it in his business model when he was working as a pharmacist. You see it in the mission. He lets people, he's an enabler. It's his style not to manage by making all the decisions. And of course, the mission for it to grow, it has to be this way. He's the perfect man for this time. He maybe wasn't before, because at that time we needed more hands-on guidance, but now the mission's got to expand. And any of you who have seen the Whispers would know that, his role is consecration and enablement and expansion, etc. And so, he trusts people, and he lets them take responsibility, lets them make mistakes. He's very patient, etc. And so people blossom and flower in that environment. We can't keep up with him, because he's way ahead of where we're at with all this. As the mission organization is moving slower than he is and what he can see, which is, I'm sure, the same with all masters. He's trying to bring us up to something. So, but I think if you would take a quality that I find is the quality that it's his tenderness. It's palpable, but it's just not there. It's sort of like cotton wool. There's such tenderness, such, like a mother, just loving kindness and generosity, which is just astounding. So, that's all I can think of right now.
It was interesting that you mentioned that Kanha was mentioned in the Whispers from the Brighter World way back in 2003. And
No. Chariji mentioned it in 2003 to an Australian preceptor.
Okay.
But in the Whispers, it started later.
Okay.
Yeah.
So we would like to ask another question in relation to destiny. If you wouldn't mind, we would like to take you as an example. You are known to be working with Chariji very closely, and now similarly with Daji. How would you interpret your own destiny? Was it fate or good fortune, or was it something that was preordained, or was it simply free will?
I have no idea, Ramesh, none whatsoever. I couldn't even begin to understand that. Maybe it's because I needed more work done on me than others. I don't think that the people are always closest to the masters are the most deserving or the most evolved. You all know the story probably of Eklavya, who, ended up becoming a better archer than Arjun, and he was nowhere near Guru Drona in the story. So it's not because of anything being better. There was once an Italian preceptor who asked Chariji, why do I have such good fortune to be here with you, etc. I don't feel deserving. Why am I here? And I also don't feel deserving. So it's got nothing to do with that. And Chariji's answer was, it's nothing to do with deservingness. It's about belonging. So who knows? This can be past life. It can also be present life. I feel very blessed, but I don't feel that it's because I'm I've done anything better than anyone else for sure. Maybe to the contrary, maybe I need more help.
Okay. Would you mind sharing some of your works that you're currently engaged in directly with Daji?
Oh, no, not really. I mean, basically, I work on publications. So, you know, his work with the publications team, I'm a part of that. So it's all about, you know, getting his talks transcribed, getting his dictations transcribed, getting, you know, things into a shape where he can work with them on his books and all that sort of stuff. It's very much day-to-day working with the content of what he's telling us in all these sessions that we listen to on Sundays and at other times. There's one tomorrow for Janmashtami. Those of you who saw the satsang this morning would know that he gave a beautiful talk this morning about the Bhagavad Gita and the 7 slokas of the Bhagavad Gita that were verbally communicated from Lord Krishna to Arjuna on the battlefield before the war started, and how the others were transmitted heart to heart and picked up. That communication was picked up by the sage Vyasa and written down later. So things like that, you know, we work on getting the transcripts done and getting things ready for production, for books, etc. It's very wonderful because you're constantly engaged with the literature of heartfulness, with his thoughts and his ideas, and typing them, putting them on paper, etc.
Thank you. These are probably some of the most sought after insights and answers that we have been waiting for on our program, and we are truly indebted for all the invaluable experiences you have shared with us today. Finally, could you please give a few words of advice to all our participants in this 90-day challenge program?
Oh, I don't think I'm one to give advice. All I can say is just put your hearts into it. Do the best you can, be inspired, try and feel as intensely as you can, like these exercises we did. After meditation, ask yourself, how do I feel? Keep your eyes closed, write your journal, and get the most out of it you can. And if you're struggling with anything, ask for help. Go to your trainer, tell them what you're struggling with. Nobody's going to judge you. Everybody's going to basically offer you whatever help they can. When I was a new practitioner back a long time ago, my poor preceptor, looking back, I used to bug him. And, you know, his wife was so patient. She would invite me around to the house. I'd have sittings, she'd cook for me, and, you know, she'd look after my family, my kids while I was having sittings, etc. People are so lovely and so supportive in this system. So, you know, use that support. Loot the trainers in the system, because we're here to help. And if you need that, if you have any stupid questions are always good, because somebody needs to ask them, and most people are too proud or embarrassed to ask them. So if you can ask and get your answers clarified, it's wonderful.
Thank you, Dr. Elizabeth Denley, for this wonderful session with you today. I'm sure all our viewers are truly inspired, and you have unveiled many insights for us that will support, promote, and uplift us all during the journey of this course of 90 Days Challenge. Thank you once again.
Good.
And we thank all the viewers for tuning in and joining us. See you all next week. Namaste.
Bye, everyone.
Bye-bye.